The shuttle's landing thrummed like a heartbeat across the soft, glowing plains of Arathian IV. Dr. Elias Rourke gripped the edge of his seat, feeling the vibration travel up his arms, through his spine, and settle somewhere deep in his chest. Outside the viewports, the world shimmered in colors that had no names in any human language. Trees like columns of liquid glass stretched skyward, their leaves glinting like scattered gemstones. Rivers floated a few feet above the ground, ribbons of water defying gravity, moving in slow, deliberate arcs. The air smelled sweet, almost like a mix of honey and rain. Elias had traveled across 4 light years to stand here, part of humanity's first exploratory mission to a planet that had been detected by long-range sensors as potentially harboring life. The crew was small, 10 people in total, each a specialist in their field. They were scientists, linguists, engineers, and diplomats. Elias himself was a linguist and a cultural diplomat, trained not just to understand words, but the unspoken language of expression, gesture, and meaning. But nothing in his training could prepare him for what he saw when the hatch opened. A figure stood at the edge of the glowing forest. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of the light. She was tall, taller than most humans, with long limbs that seemed to move as if following music only she could hear. Her skin was a subtle, iridescent shade, like liquid pearl, reflecting the light of the planet in gentle waves. Her eyes were enormous, dark and luminous, seeming to hold galaxies within them. Every movement she made was slow, deliberate, and full of a grace that made Elias's chest tighten. The shuttle door hissed open, but she did not move. She simply stood there, observing. Elias felt the world shrink to a narrow tunnel of focus. Him, the alien, and the unbearable weight of recognition. She was intelligent. That much was obvious. He could feel it, though no words had passed between them. "Dr. Rourke," said Commander Lee, his voice calm but firm. "Remember, first contact protocol, no sudden movements. No verbal interaction unless she initiates. Observation first." Elias nodded, but he felt his training unraveling in the presence of something so incomprehensibly beautiful and alive. The words in his head began to scramble. He wanted to speak, to greet, to explain, to understand. But each time he opened his mouth, the right syllables dissolved into nothing. The alien shifted her weight slightly, her head tilting, and a soft vibration rose from her chest. It was not sound, at least not sound Elias could hear. But somehow he felt it. His heart raced. He cleared his throat. I mean... His tongue refused to form proper words. He took a shaky step forward, unsure if it was forward toward her or toward the precipice of some mistake. Then, without thinking, he blurted, "Your beauty makes it hard for me to speak." The world seemed to freeze. The alien woman, Kalara, as the researchers would later learn to call her, stood still, motionless, as if time itself had paused for her response. Elias felt every pair of eyes in the shuttle cabin shift to him, some in surprise, some in disbelief. He wanted to retreat, to hide behind protocol, to vanish into some safe corner of logic, but her gaze held him. Kalara did not step back. She did not retreat. Instead, she seemed to study him with a depth that made him feel stripped bare. There was no judgment, no anger, no fear, just observation, curiosity, and something he could not yet name. Commander Lee finally spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Remain calm." "This is a response. Observe her." Elias exhaled slowly, trying to regain some semblance of composure. He noticed now that the air around her shimmered slightly, tiny motes of light drifting like dust, responding to her presence. Her hands hung by her sides, elongated and delicate, with subtle web-like membranes stretching from wrist to finger that caught the light. Every detail of her form was mesmerizing. He had studied alien anatomy in theory, read every paper, every report from speculative scientists on Earth, but nothing prepared him for the reality. She was unlike anything humanity had imagined. "Do you understand me?" he asked cautiously, unsure if he was even speaking aloud or just thinking. She tilted her head again, her large dark eyes blinked slowly, and Elias felt a rush of awareness sweep over him. It was not comprehension in the human sense. It was recognition. Recognition that he was there. Recognition of his intent. Recognition of the emotions he carried. He swallowed hard. Every logical part of his brain screamed that he should remain silent, observe, wait for her to make the first move. But another part, the part of him that had crossed galaxies to reach this moment, urged him forward. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his hand, palm open. He tried to make the gesture universal, non-threatening. Kalara mirrored him almost instantly. Elias froze, heart hammering. She was responding not with words, but with movement, with intention, with subtle reflection. For hours, the humans remained there, caught in a delicate dance of observation. Kalara did not speak, but she communicated in ways humans could barely begin to understand. The tilt of her head, the arch of her fingers, the pulse of light across her skin. Elias noticed patterns, rhythms, subtle repetitions that hinted at language, at culture, at thought. At one point, she stepped closer, and Elias felt the air itself shift. The bioluminescent plants seemed to respond to her presence, pulsing brighter, as if aware of her significance. He wanted to speak, but the words that had failed him earlier fled again. All he could do was move with her, respond with gestures, and hope she understood he meant no harm. Hours passed in this silent, beautiful exchange. The rest of the team documented everything, capturing every subtle motion, every reflective shimmer of Kalara's skin, every harmonic vibration that seemed to emanate from her being. Yet none of them could match her understanding, her awareness, her subtle command of presence. Finally, as the planet's twin moons began to rise, casting twin shadows across the glowing plains, Kalara stepped back. She raised a hand slowly, deliberately, and Elias realized she was gesturing toward the forest. An invitation, perhaps. A challenge, perhaps. Elias glanced at Commander Lee, who nodded slightly. He understood without words. It was time to follow. The shuttle crew moved carefully, not rushing, not forcing, just stepping in rhythm with the alien who led them. Every step felt sacred, every breath shared. As they moved deeper into the forest, the air became richer, heavier, with scents of flowers that seemed to glow faintly with bioluminescence. The floating rivers bent gracefully around them, as if clearing a path. Kalara's presence was magnetic. Elias felt every part of him attuned to her movements, to the environment, to the subtle language of the planet itself. Eventually, they arrived at a clearing where the plants formed a natural amphitheater. The light shimmered in colors that no human eye had a name for, and the ground beneath them seemed soft and alive, pulsating gently with each step. Kalara stood at the center, arms extended in a welcoming gesture. Elias took a deep breath, summoning the courage that had carried him across light years, across uncertainty, across fear. I am Elias Rourke," he said carefully. "We come in peace and with curiosity. We wish to understand you and your world." Kalara's head tilted again, slowly, and the light in her eyes seemed to swirl, as if processing the meaning of his words. Then she moved, not forward, not away, but in a gentle arc around him, observing, testing, welcoming. Elias felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude, awe, and humility. He wanted to speak, but now, for the first time, he understood that words were only a small part of communication. Understanding could flow in movement, in patience, in shared awareness, and Kalara was teaching him that. Night fell on Arathian IV, but the forest glowed brighter, a kaleidoscope of living light. Kalara finally stopped moving and turned her gaze fully toward him. Elias, exhausted but exhilarated, realized that this was the beginning, not of conquest, not of domination, but of mutual discovery. For the first time, he felt the true weight of human potential: curiosity, empathy, courage, and the willingness to meet the unknown with openness rather than fear. Humanity had reached across the stars and found someone extraordinary, and the path forward depended on respect, patience, and the bravery to see the soul of another being, even when it was so different from their own. Elias straightened his shoulders, his heart still racing, and said softly, almost to himself, I think I will find the words soon." Kalara blinked once, a slow, deliberate gesture, and Elias understood. She would wait. The first contact had been made, and in the quiet glow of the alien forest, humanity began to take its first steps toward a bond that transcended words, species, and the limits of imagination. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night, as if the universe itself had noticed. The forest seemed alive, humming with a rhythm that humans could not name. Elias Rourke and the crew followed Kalara carefully, each step soft on the pulsating ground. The floating rivers curved around them, parting just enough to make a path, as if the planet itself recognized the presence of intelligent life. Elias felt his heart pound, not from fear, but from awe. Every part of this world demanded attention, and every glance revealed something extraordinary. Kalara moved with certainty, yet without haste. Her gestures were deliberate, each movement carrying meaning. Elias realized that every tilt of her head, every slight change in her posture, was a word, a sentence, or a thought expressed in a language beyond sound. He tried to mirror her movements, uncertain at first, stumbling over subtle shifts of balance, but gradually finding a rhythm. It felt like a dance, a silent conversation of shared attention. The rest of the crew watched, taking notes, recording the interaction, their eyes wide with fascination. After some time, Kalara stopped at a natural clearing where the forest opened into a circular space, filled with glowing flora that pulsed gently in waves of color. Elias took a deep breath and glanced at his team. Commander Lee gave a slight nod, signaling that it was safe to attempt a more deliberate interaction. Elias stepped forward slowly, raising his hands in a gentle arc, a gesture meant to communicate peace and curiosity. Kalara mirrored him almost immediately. Elias felt a thrill of connection, a sense that they had crossed a subtle boundary into understanding. He remembered a line from an old Earth text, "To understand another, one must first listen without words." He realized that Kalara was teaching that lesson in living form. The alien moved closer, extending a hand, but not in the way humans would expect. There was no request for touch, no invitation to shake hands. Instead, the movement was fluid, almost musical, as if she was offering an exchange of intention rather than physical contact. Elias hesitated, then slowly mirrored her movement, holding his hand in the air, palm open, a gesture of openness. A soft vibration rose from Kalara, subtle and almost imperceptible. Elias felt it in his chest, a resonance that was neither sound nor touch, but a shared sensation. He realized that this was her form of communication, an empathic, emotional language that went beyond words. He tried to respond, sending a thought of curiosity and respect. Kalara tilted her head, and the glow of her skin changed slightly, shifting through colors that seemed to mirror the emotion Elias had sent. He gasped softly. It was understanding. True understanding. The rest of the crew watched in awe. No human had ever experienced communication on this level. The entire mission was about observation and study, but now it had become a direct personal exchange with a being whose intelligence and emotion surpassed anything they could have imagined. Hours passed as Elias experimented with gestures, movements, and intentional emotion. Kalara responded in kind, creating a dialogue that had no words, but carried meaning. At first it was simple: greetings, acknowledgement, curiosity. Gradually, more complex ideas emerged: trust, wonder, the joy of exploration. Elias noticed that every human emotion had a counterpart in Kalara's expressions. Happiness was a light, rhythmic pulsing of color across her skin. Curiosity was a slow, deliberate tilt of her head, combined with a subtle vibration. Doubt or caution was a soft dimming, a gentle pause in movement. The crew began to understand that they were witnessing a form of language entirely based on empathy and subtle expression. It was both overwhelming and beautiful. Every moment demanded full attention, every glance held the potential for insight. As night fell, the forest glowed brighter. The bioluminescent flora responded to Kalara's presence, creating a living tapestry of color and light. Elias felt an almost spiritual calm wash over him. He realized that this was not just communication, it was connection. It was the sharing of experience, unfiltered and pure. Kalara led them to a small grove where the plants formed natural seating, soft and flexible, shaped almost as if anticipating visitors. Elias sat carefully, observing her movements. She moved to a central spot and extended her arms, inviting him to engage more fully. He hesitated for a moment, then stood and mirrored her posture. A soft wave of color radiated across her skin. He understood that she was encouraging him, teaching him the rules of this new form of dialogue. He raised his hands slowly, letting his fingers trace shapes in the air. Kailara mirrored them with subtle differences, creating a rhythm of motion. Elias followed her lead, adjusting, observing, learning. Minutes stretched into an hour. The crew joined in, experimenting with gestures, patterns, and emotional resonance. Laughter emerged, soft and gentle, as humans discovered the delight of understanding without words. They realized that communication could be more than sounds. It could be shared feeling, shared awareness, a dance of mind and heart. Elias felt a sudden surge of boldness. He raised a hand and sent a deliberate thought of admiration, not just for Kalara's form or beauty, but for her intelligence, her grace, her world. The colors on her skin deepened and shimmered in a pattern he instinctively recognized as acknowledgement. "You understand," he whispered, almost to himself. "You really understand." Kalara's eyes held his gaze, wide and luminous. She tilted her head slowly, a gesture that seemed to convey both recognition and gentle amusement. Elias felt a warmth spread through him. For the first time in his life, he experienced true connection with a being entirely different from himself. And it was profound. The night deepened, yet neither Kalara nor the humans felt tired. Time seemed to stretch, each moment expanding with meaning. Elias realized that this was the beginning of something far larger than any mission plan or scientific objective. They were not just learning about a new species, they were learning about what it meant to connect, to understand, to transcend boundaries. Kailara moved toward a cluster of floating lights, hovering gently in the air. She extended her hand toward one, and it followed her movement, spiraling upward in delicate arcs. Elias understood that she was inviting him to interact with the environment itself, to perceive the world through her perception. He raised his hand and touched one of the floating lights. A soft vibration traveled up his arm, and colors shifted around him, reflecting his emotions. He gasped softly. It was a language of feeling, of presence, of attention. The rest of the crew experimented as well, each experiencing their own unique resonance. Some were delighted, some confused, some awed, but all recognized the extraordinary opportunity before them. Humanity had encountered intelligence unlike any known before, and it was teaching them that the universe was far more complex and beautiful than they had imagined. Hours later, Kalara moved toward the edge of the clearing, gesturing for the humans to follow. She led them along a path that wound through glowing foliage, higher and deeper into the forest. Elias noticed that the plants seemed to respond to her presence, bending slightly, glowing brighter, creating a tunnel of light that guided their way. They arrived at a vast, shimmering lake suspended above the ground, its surface reflecting the twin moons and the glowing forest around it. Kalara paused, looking toward the humans. then gestured for them to sit on the soft moss at the edge. Elias did, and as he gazed at the floating reflections, he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, not just to Kalara, but to the planet itself. The world pulsed with life, awareness, and intelligence, and humans were participants, not intruders. Kalara extended a hand toward the water. The surface responded, rippling in intricate patterns of light and color. Elias mirrored her movement, and as he did, he felt a shared sensation of understanding flow through him. He realized that this was her form of teaching, a lesson in perception, presence, and empathy. He turned to look at his team, and they all shared expressions of wonder, some smiling softly, some whispering in amazement. The moment was sacred, a demonstration of what humans could achieve when they approached the unknown with respect, curiosity, and openness. As the night deepened, Kalara began to move again, her motions fluid and intentional. Elias followed, trying to match her rhythm, her gestures, her intent. He felt his own awareness expand, understanding more deeply than ever before that language was only one form of expression, and that true connection often transcended words. Finally, as the twin moons rose to their zenith, Kayala paused and looked at Elias. He understood that this was a pivotal moment, an opportunity to demonstrate humanity's capacity for patience, empathy, and respect. He sent a deliberate thought of gratitude, humility, and wonder. Kalara's response was immediate, a soft wave of color, a gentle vibration, and a tilt of her head that spoke of acceptance and acknowledgement. Elias smiled, feeling a surge of relief and joy. For the first time, he sensed that humans and Kalara were truly beginning to understand one another. The crew settled near the lake, observing the glowing reflections and experimenting with their own gestures. Laughter and soft conversation filled the air, blending seamlessly with the gentle hum of the forest. Elias realized that this experience was more than scientific discovery. It was a lesson in humanity itself. Humanity had traveled across the stars seeking knowledge, but what they had found was something more profound, the capacity to connect, to understand, and to share experience with beings unlike themselves. And in this moment, Elias felt the weight of that potential more clearly than ever before. Kalara moved to the center of the clearing once again, her form radiant under the twin moons. She gestured toward the humans, inviting them to continue learning, exploring, and sharing. Elias rose, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This was only the beginning. Humanity had crossed the threshold of understanding, and the lessons Kalara would teach them were far greater than any words could contain. They were learning to see with their hearts, to speak with their presence, and to understand in ways that transcended language. And as Elias watched Kalara, standing still yet commanding the attention of all around her, he understood that the true beauty of this encounter was not in her appearance, but in the depth of connection she offered. The night stretched on, filled with light, color, and shared experience. And somewhere deep inside, Elias knew that humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, not as conquerors, not as observers, but as equals, capable of empathy, understanding, and wonder. The twin moons of Arathion 4 hung high in the sky, their silver light reflecting off the floating rivers and glowing flora. The forest pulsed softly, alive with gentle color waves that responded to Kalara's presence. Elias Rourke and the human team followed her deeper into the heart of the alien forest, each step feeling like part of a sacred ritual. Every motion, every glance seemed to carry meaning beyond anything they had encountered before. Kalara led them to a wide clearing, circular and vast, where the trees arched overhead like natural columns. The ground beneath was soft, cushioned with luminous moss that seemed to hum under their feet. Floating above the clearing were hundreds of small, glowing orbs, each pulsating with light in rhythm with the forest. Elias felt a rush of awe. This place was not just beautiful, it was alive, aware, and designed to teach. Kalara paused at the center, her tall, graceful figure bathed in the glow of the moons. She extended her arms slowly, the gesture inviting the humans to join her. Elias understood instinctively that this was the beginning of the next stage in their understanding, the dance of understanding, a ceremony that would teach humans the language of empathy, presence, and connection. The crew exchanged nervous glances. No one had prepared them for this. It was not something they could study in a textbook or analyze in a lab. This was alive, experiential learning, a direct exchange of awareness between species. Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward. He raised his hands in imitation of Kaelara, palms open, fingers extended. Moving slowly as she had shown, Kaelara's skin shifted through a spectrum of colors, brighter and more vibrant than ever before. Elias felt a gentle vibration in his chest, the rhythm of Kaelara's presence syncing with his own heartbeat. He realized that the dance was more than movement. It was attention. It was intention. Each gesture, each tilt of the head, each shift of weight was a word, a sentence, a thought expressed without sound. He felt a thrill of exhilaration. Humans were learning a language not of words, but of shared perception. Kaelara moved through the clearing with fluid, musical grace, and Elias mirrored her as best he could. At first his motions were awkward, uncertain, a clumsy imitation of her rhythm. But she did not correct him. Instead, she slowed her movements, adjusting her rhythm to match his. Elias gasped softly. This was part of the lesson. Empathy required patience, understanding, and adaptation. Other members of the crew began to join in. Some were hesitant, stepping lightly to avoid breaking the rhythm of the dance. Others moved boldly, experimenting with gestures and shifts, feeling the resonance of Kaelara's presence. Laughter and soft exclamations blended with the gentle hum of the forest. It was an orchestra of discovery. As the dance continued, Elias noticed subtle changes in Kaelara's expressions. When a human movement conveyed curiosity or delight, the color of her skin would shift into vibrant blues and greens. When hesitation or doubt arose, the light would dim slightly, a gentle cue for them to slow, adjust, and observe. Elias realized that the dance was a form of teaching, a living demonstration of how her species perceived and communicated understanding. He felt his own awareness expand. Each movement required attention not just to his body, but to the feelings of those around him, the other humans, the forest, and Kaelara herself. He sensed the subtle waves of emotion and intention, understanding that connection was more than words. It was shared presence, shared awareness, and shared respect. Hours passed, but time seemed to bend within the clearing. The moons traced slow arcs across the sky. The floating rivers shimmered in response to the dance, and the glowing flora pulsed with increasing brightness. Elias felt a profound sense of unity, a recognition that humanity was participating in something far greater than a scientific experiment. They were learning to bridge a gap that had existed across species, across worlds, across understanding itself. Kaelara paused suddenly, her arms extended in a final gesture, and Elias mirrored her. A silence fell over the clearing. Yet it was not empty. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Elias felt a wave of emotion pass through him. Gratitude, awe, humility, wonder. He realized that the dance had taught more than communication. It had taught patience, empathy, and the courage to embrace the unknown. The glowing orbs above the clearing began to move, spiraling in slow arcs, creating patterns of light that reflected the harmony of the dance. Kaelara gestured for the humans to step into the center. Elias took a careful step forward, then another, until he was standing directly across from her. Their eyes met, and he felt a direct, unspoken exchange of understanding. "You see," he whispered softly to himself, "it is more than movement. It is connection. It is understanding." Kaelara's skin shimmered in response, a cascade of colors that mirrored his emotion. Elias smiled. This was the first time he felt that he had truly communicated with another sentient being across the vast gulf of difference. The sensation was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. He turned to look at his team. Each member was fully engaged, mirroring Kalara's gestures, adapting to the rhythm of the dance. Some laughed softly when their movements faltered, others adjusted carefully, observing Kalara's subtle cues. Elias realized that this was more than a ceremony. It was a demonstration of humanity's ability to learn, adapt, and empathize. As the moons reached their zenith, Kalara began to move in a new pattern, faster and more intricate. Elias struggled to keep pace, but he felt the vibrations of her presence guiding him, adjusting his movements in real time. He discovered a joy in the rhythm, a delight in the shared awareness that transcended language and species. He noticed that Kalara's gestures were not random. Each movement carried meaning, a story, a concept, or an idea. The humans began to understand that they were being taught not just gestures, but the principles of thought, perception, and emotion that underpinned Kalara's culture. Elias felt a thrill of excitement. Humanity had encountered intelligence before, but never in such a personal, immersive form. Here, learning was not through books or recordings, but through direct, shared experience. They were being invited into a way of perceiving the universe that transcended human limitations. The dance continued for what felt like hours. Elias's body grew tired, but his mind and spirit felt invigorated. He realized that fatigue did not diminish understanding. In fact, it heightened awareness. The focus required for each movement, each connection, sharpened his perception, making him more attuned to subtle shifts in color, vibration, and intention. At one point, Elias faltered, misreading Kalara's gesture and stepping out of rhythm. A soft wave of dimmed light passed across her skin. He froze, feeling a moment of panic. But Kalara did not withdraw. She slowed her movement, adjusted to his pace, and guided him back into harmony. Elias felt a surge of relief and gratitude. This was the essence of the lesson. Empathy required patience, understanding, and forgiveness. The humans began to internalize the rhythm, no longer merely imitating Kalara, but responding intuitively to the subtle cues of her gestures, the vibrations in the air, and the color shifts of her skin. They began to communicate through motion, intention, and presence, creating a shared language that was immediate, intimate, and profound. Elias felt a connection, not just to Kalara, but to the entire forest, the floating rivers, and the glowing flora. Everything seemed aware, responsive, and alive. The lesson extended beyond the alien. It was a lesson about perception, awareness, and harmony with the world itself. As the night wore on, Kalara guided the humans to a circular formation around her, each person holding their position in careful alignment with her gestures. The glowing orbs above spiraled faster, creating complex patterns of light that reflected the collective energy of the group. Elias felt a wave of understanding sweep through him. This was more than a dance. It was a meditation, a ritual of connection, a shared experience that transcended species, words, and culture. Humanity was participating in something extraordinary, something that would redefine their understanding of communication, empathy, and intelligence. Finally, Kalara extended a gesture of completion, a final sweeping motion that invited the humans to rest and observe. Elias sank to the soft moss, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the forest through his body. The humans settled around him, each absorbed in the wonder of what they had experienced. Elias glanced at Kalara. She stood still, tall and radiant, her skin shimmering softly. Her eyes held the depth of galaxies, and in them, Elias saw the reflection of humanity, not as conquerors, not as explorers in the traditional sense, but as beings capable of empathy, understanding, and connection. He realized with a thrill of hope that this was what humanity had always sought, not dominance, not power, but understanding. Here on Arathion IV, they were learning the highest form of intelligence, the ability to connect across difference, to share experience, and to perceive the universe with both mind and heart. The forest around them pulsed gently, as if acknowledging their efforts. The floating rivers shimmered, The glowing flora shifted through soft patterns of color, and the orbs above continued to dance, reflecting the harmony of the moment. Elias felt a quiet certainty. Humanity had reached a new stage, not in technology or conquest, but in awareness and empathy. They had begun to understand that true intelligence was measured not by knowledge alone, but by the capacity to connect, to share, and to respond to the universe with openness and respect. Kalara moved closer to Elias, her gestures slow and deliberate. He raised his hand in response, and she mirrored him perfectly. A wave of color swept across her skin, reflecting mutual understanding and acknowledgement. Elias smiled, feeling a warmth that radiated from his chest outward. This moment, he realized, would stay with him forever. It was a proof of humanity's potential, not just as explorers or scientists, but as beings capable of empathy, creativity, and wonder. Kalara had taught them more in a single night than any book, lecture, or simulation could ever convey. As the first light of Arathion IV's twin suns began to touch the horizon, the humans rose slowly, feeling renewed and transformed. Kalara's gestures invited them to continue their journey deeper into the forest, toward new experiences, lessons, and connections. Elias took one last glance at the glowing clearing, the floating orbs, and Kalara's radiant form. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Humanity had crossed a threshold, entering a world of understanding and connection that defied words. And as they followed Kalara into the dawn of a new day on Arathion IV, Elias knew that this was only the beginning of an extraordinary journey. A journey not of conquest or control, but of empathy, wonder, and the unshakable courage to embrace the unknown. The dance of understanding had begun, and with it, the humans were learning to see the universe through the eyes of another species, an experience that would forever change their perspective, their culture, and their place among the stars.